So you want to be a successful real estate investor and you've just closed your first property. Do you hire a property manager or do you have the skills to take it on yourself? On today's show, we're going to cover all the nuts and bolts about property management, and we're going to get some tips, tricks of the trade that are going to make you a successful property manager. Hi, my name is Juan Huizar, president of Sage Real Estate, your fourplex market leader and your highest rated apartment broker in the city of Long Beach. Today we're sitting down with Tyler Mehl, one of the co-owners of Belmont Shore Land Co. in Long Beach. Tyler is a property manager and he's going to share with us his knowledge. He's going to give some tips and tricks that you could apply today on your own units, or maybe show you the proper way of selecting your next property manager. Without any further ado, let's jump right into it. Tyler, thank you for being here. You know, with our show, as you know, our goal is to educate and show people how to build wealth through real estate ownership, more specifically apartment ownership. For some of the new investors out there, do they need a property manager?
I would say for a new investor, you definitely need a property management company, especially if you're unfamiliar with the area. The biggest key are vendors. Do you have the right people going to fix the properties? Do you trust them? If you don't, it might be better to give it to a property manager, because it's one of the biggest things you'll have to deal with as a property owner is who's going to repair your property, who's going to look after your property. And a property manager already has it all built in. If you're willing to go through that extra effort to find these people and get them into the system and try them out, go for it yourself. But if you're not looking for a headache every week, you should probably hire a property manager.
Got it. And Tyler, what I tell some of our clients is, do you have extra time? Because if they have extra time, sometimes they're pretty handy, or their dad's a contractor, they're from Long Beach. In some cases, I'm like, if you have the time, then you could probably do it. And the reason being is properties are high. Mm-hmm. They're having to put a down payment down. They're trying to make it break even, maybe make a little cash flow. So sometimes we're looking at that. But my advice typically is, if you have no time and if you're out of the area 100%, and you're right, if you don't have the contacts, the vendors, the people you trust, you could really put yourself in a tight position.
The day-to-day management of every unit doesn't take that much time. It's all the other stuff that a property management company already has, which are the vendors. They know how to deal with the city they're working in. They don't have to go to school for every property that comes on board. Now, if you're talking about a new investor in a new area, there's a lot they have to learn. They don't know market rents. They don't have vendors. They don't know how the city works. Mm-hmm. So going through a property management company, even though the job can be easy once it's set up and in the process, there's a lot of effort that goes on beforehand to get to that property to that stage.
If I hire a property management company like yours, is it completely hands-off for me?
For the most part, it can be whatever you want it to be.
Okay.
Every company will be different. There's a level of co-management that some property managers are willing to go through. We don't like it very much, because the old saying, there's too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yep.
You need decision makers. But if you have an understanding with your property manager and you have a clear definition of the roles, you can be somewhat hands-on, or you can be like most of our clients who they get a report every month and they get a check every month. And we call them when something major happens at the property.
Yeah.
But other than that, they're completely hands-off.
Okay. If someone wanted to say, hey, when there's a plumbing issue, we want you to use this specific company, that's something you guys could accommodate?
Actually, that's pretty difficult.
Okay.
Usually when you're working with a company, you know how that plumber works. And I currently have 3 plumbers that I use. Okay. If I have to throw in a 4th, 5th, or 6th plumber, that's not efficient for me. Everybody bills differently, everybody works differently, everybody schedules repairs differently. If you do have a vendor you're beholden to and love, it might be difficult to get them in the mix with a property management company.
Okay. Tyler, if we utilize a property management company, does that maybe take some of the liability off me as an owner?
Financially, no. Everybody is liable. If you don't know what you're doing, it probably does remove some liability, because you're dealing with somebody who is going to naturally remove the liability of not knowing what to do in specific situations.
Right.
So hiring a management company removes the opportunity for liability. But in terms of your financial liability, you're liable.
Sure. Okay. And that makes perfect sense. You know, sometimes we get calls and people will make statements like, you know, I increased the rent. And I said, oh, by how much? And they give me a number that's double digits, which you and I know is not allowed. And I'm like, you're not legally allowed to do that. And he's like, well, I did it. And so you're right. A lot of times people just don't know what they don't know, and they think they're doing the right thing. And then it turns out that it's sometimes against the law.
I get calls all the time from previous tenants, from friends. Hey, so-and-so raised it's usually a rent raise. So-and-so raised my rent this amount. They texted it to me, or they called me with it. And I say, they're not supposed to do that.
Right.
There's a process, and they clearly don't know how that process works.
Right. Yeah. And the reason why you bring up a text is that it's got to be written. And so, so there's more details. We won't go into that today, but talk to us about vacancies. Are there any vacancies?
There's vacancies. It's not nearly what we would see at this time, but what we have seen is a dramatic increase in the amount of people looking for rentals. So maybe it's a little lower than it should be at this time, but the last 2 years have been different, and there have been less. And they've been at different times of the year than we normally see them. We're experiencing a lot of people did not move for a year or so because of COVID. Now, what happened in that time is all the rents continued to rise because there was low inventory. Now anybody who's looking to move, especially people looking to move within the community itself, are having to pay a much higher rate just for that move, even if it's a lateral move. So you have very low intercommunity movement. You also have people fleeing other markets like Los Angeles, and they're bringing more money down here, which is why the prices are going up drastically. So those are a few of the reasons. It's not very easy to remove people in this market. So a lot of natural vacancies you would have from tenants not being able to pay rent or tenants being a nuisance are not happening because it is much more difficult to remove those people from their apartments.
When you're talking about rents increasing, like all that sounds very positive from a landlord perspective. Sometimes our investors will ask me, but Juan, what if rents drop? What if rents drop? Have you seen rents drop?
I've never seen rents drop.
Okay.
I've been doing this for 14 years.
Okay.
The closest I got to rents dropping were probably a stagnation in late 2008. With the market crash, we saw rents kind of stay put for 2 or 3 years. Since 2010, 2011, it's been only up. You have slow times, especially during the holidays. But in the past, there have been times where you overestimate what the value of the property is, but it's usually still renting for more than the previous tenant was paying.
Right. So that's kind of a point that we want to make is that, listen, real estate values could go up and down, but rents don't go up and down. Rents are going to continue to go up.
Yes.
And so one thing that I tell folks who have saved up the 20% that they need for their first fourplex and they want to buy it, and there's a couple reasons why they kind of put the pause on it. One reason is they think values are going to drop. Okay, so then I get them through that. The other thing is they believe that if the market drops, that the rents go down with it, and that's what you're telling me is not the case.
It's not what we have seen.
Correct.
Usually when prices go up, you have more renters.
Tyler, let's talk about Section 8. So oftentimes our clients will ask us, is Section 8 a good thing? Now, you and I know that we can't deny someone because they're using Section 8 funds. Yeah. So that's a fact, okay? But what are your experiences with Section 8 housing, tenants? Like, what are your thoughts there?
Still to this day, even though AB 1482 passed 2.5 years ago, we have not accepted a Section 8 tenant. And the reason being is none of the Section 8 tenants who have applied to our property meet our income and meet our credit standards, which we can still maintain via Section 8. It can't be a reason to turn somebody down, but we can still maintain our income standards and our credit standards. The income, we consider a voucher a full month's of rent, but they have to have supplementary income that covers the 2.5 times plus the voucher. And so far that hasn't happened.
Okay.
In terms of whether it's a good investment or not, from what I understand, most Section 8 tenants are approved for more than the property is usually renting for. And we've seen a lot of people take advantage of that to earn extra money.
Yes.
It depends on what type of work and what type of tenant you have. Again, you can probably have a great Section 8 tenant and you're going to make more money on that. And you'd have the same problems if you had a bad tenant who's not on Section 8 versus a bad tenant who is.
We're a big proponent of Section 8. We think that it's, during COVID, the government kept paying the rental amount, so you weren't having to chase down.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's an investment. Let's talk about the eviction process. And I know this one's a little confusing too, because a lot of landlords we were waiting to get through the COVID process. We've been waiting to get possession of our units again for one reason or the other, and we're being told that we still can't proceed with an eviction process. in most cases. What's going on with the process? Can we evict someone? Can we not? What's going on?
If you really want to know what's going on, you should, and you're considering doing an eviction, you should contact an attorney. The laws have been changing so rapidly that it would probably require a legal expert to tell you exactly what is going on. Evictions have still happened. We've done one.
You were able to actually proceed with an eviction because there was a violation of a lease?
No, we were able to proceed with an eviction because the tenants did not follow the process that they were required to. We've been limited in our ability, and I believe we will continue to be limited in our ability.
Correct.
The issue with the evictions is, besides non-payment of rent, most cause of actions are hard to prove. A tenant is being a bad neighbor, a tenant is violating some provision of the lease. If you were to go to court, you need proof to support that.
Right.
And that's the difficult part of doing an eviction that is not based off of rent.
So it is still possible?
Yes.
To do some evictions. And when we talk about evictions, it's not like no one is looking to evict everyone. Like, because it's an investment, you're trying to deal it. You're trying to make sure that you're prudent in the way that you're managing it, and the ways that you stabilize. And when I say stabilize, that you bring the rents up to market, you do some improvements, and sometimes you need possession. So it's not like we're pro eviction. It's just in some situations we would love to know that the landlord still has that right.
Yes.
Right.
And sometimes the evictions are necessary. I think a lot of focus is put on evictions, especially with new property owners. To be honest, it's not a huge part of my day-to-day business. If you take your time to select the correct tenants, you will avoid most evictions. I've been doing this for 14 years, and I've done 15 evictions. And I would say over half of those were inherited tenants, not my own.
Got it.
If you spend your time selecting the right people, evictions are a small part of the business.
Got it. And we'll get into tenant selection a little bit later here in these questions. Another question I get is, Juan, are people paying their rent? And I know this was a conversation that you and I would have during COVID, and you would kind of give me a breakdown. You're like, hey, Juan, based on the units that we manage, and there was always a percentage. And so, like, overall, are people paying their rent?
For the most part, people are paying their rent. Out of the whole COVID period, I would say only 5% of my tenants ever got 30 days past due. So it's a very small percentage. And currently today we sit around 2% of our tenants owe some form of money.
Got it.
And it's usually the people who owed more continue to owe, but as it gets paid off, that balance is reset.
Well, that's good news for anyone looking to get started, or for anyone who was just wondering, oh my gosh, if I buy this, what are the bad things that are going to happen? Overall, those are just concerns that may not come to fruition. So I know you don't have a lot of vacancies. When you do, where do you advertise them? What are you seeing out there when it comes to like one vacant unit?
One vacant unit, the best place to get the most eyeballs is Zillow. $9.99 a week to advertise on Zillow. And in fact, the biggest problem we have with renting vacancies right now is we get too many calls.
Oh, okay. How many inquiries are we getting on, call it an average one bedroom, an average two bedroom?
An average one bedroom in this market today, we are getting 20 to 30 inquiries a day.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a lot.
You could probably find the right tenant within those first 20 or 30 in one day.
If you don't find your tenant in those first 20 and 30, your price is wrong.
Okay.
But what we found in the past, if you're not getting 4 or 5 phone calls or inquiries a day on a one bedroom or a studio, your price is probably too high. Now you might find somebody in that group, but you're at the top of the market for that individual unit. And the higher end the property, the less people you will have calling, because you are now fighting for those tenants with either the next step up, which is a 2-bedroom, or if you're in 2 bedrooms, the next step up is a house or buying a house. So if you're at the top end, don't expect to get as many phone calls as an average unit would get.
So that's a terrific thing. If I'm a new investor and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the rents are at their top, oh my gosh, I'm paying so much for my apartment building. Positive note is that there's strong rental demand and the rents continue to go up. Some of the things that I say is that, Tyler, is that the income of today is not the income of tomorrow, because what your property is currently generating today is going to be significantly more down the road, right? And that could just be through inflation, right? It could be through demand. Obviously there's a shortage on housing, but sometimes we make the mistake as an investor of looking at the gross income for that year. I remind them, are you only going to own it for 1 year? No, I plan to own it for 10, 20 years. Okay, great. It's kind of even much better position. But that's positive to know that with all that we've gone through, in and out of COVID, that the rents are still strong. And they continue, and the demand is there. How do you go about turning down a tenant? Like when you have 10 applicants,
Yep.
You find the one you want. What do you tell the other tenants? How do you properly tell them that you've decided to go with somebody else?
There are forms that you can fill out to send to a tenant,
Okay.
Letting them know that they've been turned down. And what we find is usually honesty is the best quality. If they weren't the top applicant, you let them know. In this market, you have the choice of a lot of good applicants. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you're having to turn down people who are perfectly qualified for your unit. The best thing is to limit the amount of applications you receive. When you get a good one, you accept it. Don't look for another one or look for a third one. Accept the first great application you see.
What are some questions that you ask that helps you identify a good applicant from one that may not be as good?
There's two big things we really look at.
Sure.
And that is their credit score. Okay. Do they pay their bills on time? And for somebody who has any blemishes on their credit report, do they have explanations for that problem that makes sense? Mm-hmm. The other thing is spending 15 to 20 minutes talking with the tenants, future tenants, mm-hmm. about their applications. Talk to them about their jobs, their previous places. Get to know them. Because usually if you don't want a tenant, it's right there on the application, and they'll say it to you without saying it to you. Mm-hmm. Right. So getting to know the tenants and making sure they're nice, normal people who are going to get along with their neighbors.
Right.
Is usually found out in a 10 to 15 minute conversation.
That's true. We
find that calling references has not always been a great source of finding tenants, because in the 14 years I've been doing this, I can't remember getting a single bad reference.
There you go. And that's even more reason to hire a professional management company. How do you read a credit score or a credit report, right? I mean, they could be 12, 14 pages long, and you need to be able to break it down and so that you could have them explain those items. So another reason why you would need that. Tyler, you guys manage hundreds and hundreds of rental properties here in Long Beach. What are some of the most common repair requests that you see?
The most common are plumbing. Plumbing in this city is old. These properties were built anywhere from the 20s to the late 50s for the most part. You get some condo buildings that were built in the 70s. Yeah. But most stuff was built when they were still using galvanized steel. And most of our repairs are plumbing related, stoppages. Because those 2-inch pipes have now slowly gone down to 1.5-inch pipes. Now, it's great if you have a replumbed building, but again, not all tenants know the lay of the land and will put orange peels in the garbage disposal and anything down the sink, and they don't know they're not supposed to. A big thing, have a great plumber, because they will save your bacon more times than you know. Okay, and so how do I go about advising someone hey, this is your first rental property. Mm-hmm. What can we do to try to protect ourselves or to put ourselves in a position to make sure that that the plumbing's in good shape? What you do is you have a plumber come out and assess it. Yeah. Have him look at it. Have him tell you if there's problems. Are the pipes old? Mm-hmm. Do you have a garbage disposal? Some people get familiar with these things yourself. Yeah. You'll save yourself a lot of money if you figure out how to rewind a garbage disposal. Familiarize yourself with how to light pilot lights, how to fix a jammed garbage disposal. Okay. Small stuff will save you some money. Sure. And it'll make you a better property manager. You can let your tenants know. This is when you go and turn on the stove, especially the older stoves that have the 2 pilot lights. Tenants walk in, they smell gas, they think the building's going to explode. They don't want to light it because they think their eyebrows will be blown off. I light them all the time, and I still have most of my hair. That's right. One of the things that we recommend when we're selling someone their apartment building is we'd say, hey, we're going to have a home inspection. Let's get a plumber to run a camera down the sewer line, because that's the one thing that the home inspector is not going to see. They can't see what's underneath the ground. And so it's interesting because in some cases, we're probably better off just getting a plumbing inspection more so than even a home inspection, because we know that plumbing is going to be our big ticket item when it comes to repairs. Yes. How do you handle some situations where, and even myself too, with some of my units, my tenants will call me and say,
hey, do you mind if we pull out the carpet and put in flooring? Do you mind if we just do the painting ourselves? Like, how do you handle that? Because I know some people might say, don't do it, it's a liability, or I guess what's your expert opinion on that?
I don't want my tenants dealing with plumbing or electrical, first of all. It's a pretty much 100% no.
Got it.
When a tenant makes a request, you want to see what potential damage can a tenant do. A tenant wants to paint. What's the problem with letting them paint? They paint the walls black. I've had that happen. Yeah. It's not just one coat of paint to cover that up. They put oil base over water, or vice versa. And now, 5 years down the road, all the walls are peeling for some unexplained reason.
Right.
You try and allow as few repairs made by the tenants as possible. Of course, you want them to replace their own light bulbs, light their own pilot lights. And if a tenant really wants to paint their child's bedroom, I'm fine with that. You let them know, if I have to paint it back or it costs me extra to paint it back, we will charge for that. So be upfront if there are any damages that you will charge for those damages, but never let your tenants do anything that you couldn't do yourself.
Got it.
And for the most part, it's better to just take care of it yourself and ask the tenants not to repair stuff.
What are some best practices when you close on your first rental property? What are some like immediate things you should be looking out for?
You should contact the tenants right away. Now,
now, Tyler, as obvious as that sounds, properties trade and there's no communication with the tenants. The tenants, poor tenants, they don't know where to send the rent. They know it's sold because they kind of like, you know, it was obvious that people were coming in, taking pictures, and they see on the internet that it's sold, but no one's communicated with them. So, so the first one is letting them know, hey, I'm the new owner.
Yeah, and this actually happened in one of the recent transactions we were involved with.
Okay.
I got a call the night the property closed, and there was a plumbing backup. And I was no longer the manager as of 5 hours previously.
Yes.
So the tenants should know who they're dealing with. You should go meet them. Ask them if they have any concerns on the property. Start off on the right foot.
Sure.
In terms of what repairs should you do right away, what should you look at, we would always say don't disrupt something that doesn't need to be disrupted.
Right.
Don't drop off a rent raise the moment you get there. Give the tenants a few minutes to adjust to the new landlords.
Right. Right.
After that point, do whatever you want, set the tempo, make the rules, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
I mean, every building's different, so things are going to need to be repaired. Obviously, if there's anything that needs to be taken care of right away, do that. But make sure you're a present owner.
Yeah.
And don't let the tenants wonder what's going on with my building. Because if they're not confident in the new landlord, 1 month in, you could get a move out because they're uncomfortable or they don't know what's happening with their property. And a lot of tenants will move before, during, or after a sale because they don't want the change.
Right. Right. Especially when sometimes these tenants had a good relationship with a longtime owner. And sometimes they do move, and which kind of brings me to another point. Sometimes we're selling buildings and the new buyer is concerned because maybe the rents are still too low, and even with the allowable increases, it's going to take time to get there. Yes. And I tell them, you're going to be surprised. People are going to give you notice to move out, and it's for that reason. It's not because they want to move out. It's just that change is not comfortable for everyone. And they're unfamiliar with the new person. Some of these concerns kind of might work out for both. Yeah. The tenant doesn't have to deal with the new owner, and then the owner could start fresh with the vacant unit in some cases.
Yeah, and sometimes tenants use that as a good stopgap or chant, hey, the management's changing, I need a change. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with the property, but this is a good time to go find something new.
Yeah.
Maybe not in the market we're in, where they go start looking and realize everything's much more expensive.
Right.
But they do tend to move when there are vacancies.
I have a client who rents it out his property, and only to find out a few months later that tenant is using that as a Airbnb rental. Are you seeing some of that short-term rental stuff out there?
We've seen it before. It's an automatic notice to move from us. Got it. It's a huge liability to have a lot of people coming and going from the property that you don't know. They don't know who to call when there's a major problem. The other neighbors don't know who they are. It's a big no-no. Now, I check the websites every month or two.
Okay, just because you're aware that it could be happening.
It has happened before,
Yeah.
and I expect it will happen again. But it's not something we really play around with because there's potential for large liability.
Sure.
Your property is not being used in the purpose it was designed by you.
Right. Now, it is possible that a tenant gets written permission from the owner and goes ahead and applies for the permit through the city, because the city will allow that. The owner has to permit it. And then in some cases, they do it without a permit, without the owner knowing, and obviously that's something that wouldn't be allowed.
Yes, and I'm sure some of that happens that we're not aware of. Being diligent on the property is good, and you will catch some of that if it's happening at your property.
Sure. What are management fees today? And I know that they're different, and I know that some are going to offer a little more service.
Yes.
What's kind of the range that we're going to see?
What the management fee charges is different for every property management company. Everybody does it differently. You're going to see anywhere from, I've seen people as low as 4% all the way up to 10.
Okay.
The issue is not that management fee. The issue is what else are they charging for? So a lot of companies will offer tiered plans, which is strange because all property managers essentially do the same thing and have the ability to do the same thing. So one thing you need to look out for are lease up fees.
Okay, so someone signs a 1-year lease.
Yes.
That, 12 months happen. And some companies might charge you to renew that lease.
Yes, they might charge you $500,000, half a month's rent, and the initial lease, the same thing. You want to factor that in because they might say we offer a 5.6% management fee, which is great, but every time we write a new lease, it's $1,000 or it's $500.
Do property management companies also charge separately for leasing, the process of actually leasing and finding a tenant for you?
Yes. I mean, a lot of companies will charge, they call it a lease up fee.
Okay. Which is different than a re-up fee.
Yes.
Okay.
So a lease up fee is when they find, every time it's vacant, they find a tenant and they charge you whatever the stated amount is. That's something that my company personally does. We have a flat fee based on the percentage of rents collected, and when the units are vacant, we're not making money. So our profitability is tied to the owner's profitability.
Got it. So there's motivation.
Yes.
So kind of what you're saying with your specific company is that you're not going to have hidden fees.
No. Another thing to look out for besides the management fee is a tiered system. Pay an extra 2% and we'll cover evictions. Why would you need to cover evictions? They shouldn't be happening.
Right.
If that is a fee, either you're going to save a lot of money by upping that, which means you're going to have a lot of evictions, or the management company is just making money off of you for something they're not doing.
Right.
Most management companies do the same 30 things, and they all have it on their websites. We do X, Y, and Z. It really doesn't depend what you do, it's how well you do it.
Got it. If I'm a consumer and I'm out there looking for good reviews on property management companies, it's typical for most property management companies to have poor reviews.
Yes.
And I'm not saying you specifically. I mean, you probably stand out from some of the others, but the reason why the property management companies have poor reviews is that they're not being reviewed by the people that hire them, which is the owners. They're getting reviewed by the tenants, who in this case call them almost third party, that are doing the reviews. And sometimes they're not accurate reviews, or hey, like in your case, I called you on a vacant unit, you didn't call me back, now I'm going to leave you a bad review. Yeah. They weren't really technically your client.
No, nobody ever paid me any money to give me that bad review.
But they gave you a bad review. So for those out there, it's common. So I don't want you to think, man, there's really no good property management companies. And I'm going to say that there probably is. Yes, there is. I mean, certainly with your company and a few others here in Long Beach that have a kind of a long tradition in being successful, being property managers. But don't be shocked if you're out there looking for good reviews and you don't see them. And if you see one company that has a lot of good reviews, they're probably new. They're probably just a newer company, and it's a matter of time before that's going to turn, because that's just the nature of that industry.
It happens. Not everybody is happy, and we don't have complete control. Sometimes you cannot fix some problems. We had an issue with somebody swore they had a terrible smell in their apartment that nobody could corroborate. Nobody knew where it was coming from. Nobody could fix it. Well, she left a bad review. I couldn't fix the problem. Okay. And you do have situations like that, and it is a business where you're dealing with people's homes, so sometimes emotions are high.
Sure.
And we are not in control of how much money the owner spends and what they think needs to be done at the property. So when you are looking at reviews for a company, take that into account that nobody's going to be perfect. A higher percentage of the people who don't feel treated well are going to review you versus a much lower percentage of people who have great experiences don't review you.
Right.
So it should be taken with a grain of salt. 2 of my bad reviews are from potential tenants who didn't get a call back.
Yeah.
And 150 phone calls, we can't return them all.
Sure. Now that makes sense. What things can you do strategically to the property that will give the tenant a better experience living there? Whether it's something they didn't have before. What are some amenities that you know people tend to frequently seek as a tenant?
There's some that you have a lot of control over, there's some you don't.
Okay.
Some that you don't. Parking. Everybody asks about parking. If you can make extra available, you should do that.
Sure.
Versus using it for storage for your own stuff. We do have owners who do that. They keep garages for themselves.
Oh yes, I've seen
and
that.
it's just filled with junk.
Oh yeah.
But
they don't think it's junk.
yes, it's important to them.
Right.
But making as many spaces possible open for your tenants. Don't let tenants rent 2 spaces. Things that you can add. Now there's small things. Yeah. You can go, every vacancy, I'm going to replace some of the hardware. On the cabinets, the ceiling fans, I'm going to upgrade those. There's light fixtures. There's minor things you can upgrade that tenants will notice when they come into a place. The big items that people look for are the updated kitchens and bathrooms, stainless steel appliances, air conditioning. Not easy to add to a lot of units.
But that's a big one.
It's a big one, especially if seems to be people are putting in the split units.
Oh yeah.
And if you can add air conditioning, people say you're by the beach, you don't need air conditioning. It's 95 degrees right now. We need air conditioning. Right. And it's a good portion of the year that you would turn on that air conditioning if you had it.
Right.
So the other things is we have a lot of great architecture in this city, and maintaining a property in the style that it was built. I've noticed we just rented a beautiful Spanish style 2-bedroom, and the owner went out and found replacement mosaic tiles. Now they did great upgrades in the kitchens and bathrooms, but they kept it authentic.
Yeah.
It looked like it belonged. So there are small things you can do, and there are major things. Other big major thing, which has now become a lot less expensive, is vinyl planking floors. A lot of my tenants, vinyl planking floors.
Yes.
My tenants love that.
Yes.
And it's about 2.5 times to 3 times the cost of carpet, and it's worth the improvement. It will save you some money in the long run.
Well, yeah, you don't have to replace the carpet or do any shampooing with the carpet, correct.
But the tenants will like it, and they're willing to pay for it.
One thing that we've done, or that we advise, is if you have the closet space, if you have the configuration. Now this was more, I guess, what you would consider more of a kind of a costly upgrade, but I think within a year or so, is adding laundry. Maybe not the appliances, but giving them a space where a washer dryer could go into. I found that you'll have more applicants. They're willing to offer more for that unit when you do that. Yes. And so now, that one takes in consideration, you're talking plumbing, electrical, HVAC, because you got to exhaust that out. So a little more work, but I think within a year, you kind of seem to get the payback on that investment, if not within 2 years.
Yeah, tenants love to have laundry. On the few buildings that I have that have zero laundry, they're much tougher to rent.
Yes.
Now, sometimes you can get away with that if every unit has a parking space.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But tenants love laundry. It is great if it's in unit. It can be expensive to connect everything up. But like AC, it's something people will actually pay more to have. And you can see it in units that don't have it versus units that do.
Mm-hmm. Tyler, can't thank you enough for spending some time with us today. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Tyler. He's here in Long Beach. Him and his father co-own the company. They do a terrific job. And so thank you, Tyler. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So there you have it. That is the interview with the property manager, Tyler Mehl. My biggest takeaway, and I hope you kind of got this and it was pretty loud and clear, when you buy rental units, rents will do one thing, and that's go up. Traditionally, if we go back, rents typically don't go down. So some of those concerns of some of my own clients that I'm working with today of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna buy this unit and what happens if rents drop? it's pretty clear that that's not going to happen. We have a housing shortage, housing prices, and rents are going to go in one direction only. And I think that's important for people to know. And so also to know that if they're going to continue going up, it confirms what I've always been saying, that the income of today will not be the income of tomorrow, because the income of tomorrow will surprise you on how high that is. That is where you get your cash flow. That is where you get some of the appreciation. So hope you enjoy the show. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Send in any questions, any topics you would like for me to cover. Until next time.